F-rank adventurer finds the supreme S-rank goddess and gains epic powers. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. Somewhere in a dungeon in Japan, Kaito Takagi was using his store-bought insecticides to hunt slimes, a common practice in his daily life. As he coldly executed each of these gelatinous monsters, he holstered his poison cans like a gunslinger in the Wild West. After 2 years of this routine on the first floor of the dungeon, Kaito had just completed his 999th slime kill. Despite feeling useless for only annihilating walking jellies, he didn't get discouraged and promised to finish off the 1,000th enemy to end the day on a high note. As he walked, security cameras followed his steps and analyzed his stats, which were never anything remarkable. Suddenly, he came face to face with a golden slime in the middle of the path, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to complete his 1,000 victories in style against this special kind. As always, the slime destroyer approached the creature and sprayed the insecticide, but this one was much more agile than he was used to, dodging the spray with the reflexes of a fly. Kaito didn't give up and pulled out his repellent gun, this time hitting the target, which fell stiff to the ground, or rather limp. Despite the achievement, the young man noticed that even this rare monster didn't give much XP, but at least he could take its magic core in hopes of fetching a good price. Upon picking up the item, he saw the image of a mythological creature drawn on what appeared to be a gold-plated card. Examining the object's description, Kaito realized it was a Valkyrie named Sylphie, getting excited at the thought of finally obtaining a legendary servant card. Looking around to make sure no one saw him pick up the card, he quickly searched the internet for information about the Valkyrie, but there was nothing in the database about her. If he wasn't mistaken, the only thing Kaito knew was that these women were demigoddesses from some mythology, which was enough for him to deduce that this item had some interesting value. Whether the card was valuable or not, the young man had no intention of giving it to anyone. Exiting the dungeon through Gate 6, he saw adventurers heading out in their powerful armor and weapons, and wondered if he'd ever get the chance to use such high-level gear. If he sold the rare card for a good price, maybe he could stroll around with a legendary flaming sword or a diamond-coated shield. With that in mind, he went to the Caverns Trading Center to sell the common slime cores he had collected. With 3 in hand, considering each was worth 500, he was offered only 1,500 yen, equivalent to $10. Playing the innocent boy, he asked the clerk how much it would be worth if he sold a rare servant card, and she said that such an item was worth about 1 billion yen overseas. Hearing this, the kid spiraled into a crazy obsession, unable to stop repeating that amount as he wandered around in a daze. After storing his belongings and leaving, he looked like a zombie, muttering the same thing until he reached the exit of the establishment, where he conducted his expeditions, the dungeon and resort, still under the watchful eyes of security cameras. The next day, on the establishment's 4-year anniversary, he was still on the same track as the day before, and this time his friends heard what he was saying and asked what this 1 billion talk was about. Trying to deflect the issue, Kaito turned to Shinji and Hayato and heard that they had obtained explorer passports and could enjoy the anniversary event's attractions for free. Later on the way home, Kaito remembered that he was only on level 3, but his friends could return and explore the dungeons to find something interesting. However, the two wanted to stay away from that kind of adventure for now. Recently, they had descended to level 2 and underestimated the goblins, thinking defeating those monsters would be easier than taking candy from a baby, but they got a merciless beating from one of those creatures. After that, they decided it was better to enjoy a light amusement park rather than get thrashed for nothing. As for Kaito, they found it curious that he had been killing slimes non-stop for 2 years, so Kaito explained that he didn't go to the dungeon just for that, but didn't delve into the matter. Upon reaching his street, walking along the sidewalk at night, Kaito was recognized by a girl from her bedroom window who seemed happy to see him passing by. The next day, a quiz show host asked how many years it had been since the dungeons appeared, and a contestant hit the button to answer that it had been 13 years, the correct response. During the meal, Kaito's parents emphasized that he needed to work but shouldn't forget to study. However, all he could think about was that card and what would happen if he summoned summon the Valkyrie. If he did, maybe he could go to the more difficult levels of the dungeons, but if he sold the card, he could buy his dream equipment plus a mansion with a pool and a private dungeon next to a home theater. This cruel dilemma hammered so much in the boy's head that he could hardly sleep, to the point of going to school the next day without rest. At least the nosy girl Katsuragi left home at the same time as him, so they bumped into each other. Seizing the moment, she asked where he went last night since she saw him returning home, so he said he was at an all-boys meeting with Shinji and Hayato, the famous boys club. Speaking of the devil, the two popped up out of nowhere on the path, so Kaito grabbed them and asked them not to tell that he went to the dungeon yesterday. Katsuragi asked what they were doing together, and each responded with something different. Noticing the inconsistency, the girl questioned if Kaito had gone to the dungeon again, but the kid lied blatantly. Innocent or not, Katsuragi believed him and went on her way. Arriving at school, Kaito asked his friends what they would do if they found a rare servant card, and the two replied that they would definitely sell it to become rich, especially since a servant could only be summoned inside the dungeons. Anyway, they pointed out that finding such a card was harder than winning the lottery, and Kaito gave a sheepish smile. During classes, he couldn't get the issue out of his head, reflecting that he wouldn't be able to sell the card if he summoned the servant, not even knowing if it would be useful to him. However, looking at Katsuragi, other ideas came to his mind. As soon as he returns to the dungeon, he pulls out the card and realizes it's worth $1 billion, but he knows he needs to follow the right path for Katsuragi's sake. Then he summons Sylphie, the Valkyrie, creating a powerful tornado in the cave that dissipates, revealing the figure of a gigantic mythological creature. This creature envelops the boy in its hands until it completely disappears, leaving the card user lost. However, a small, innocent Valkyrie pokes him on the back and introduces herself as Sylphie, making the poor boy kneel, feeling the $1 billion he had in his pocket slip away. Sylphie asks what's going on, so Kaito pretends it's nothing and invites the little girl to go slime hunting with her uncle. A few steps ahead, she catches her master's attention and alerts him to the presence of a nearby slime, and he is surprised to see that she can detect creatures around. In the end, the Valkyrie was right, and an unsuspecting slime was lurking in the depths of the cave. As usual, Kaito draws the insecticide, but before attacking, he asks Sylphie if she can defeat the creature. The small mythological figure enthusiastically affirms that she can, and then she steps forward to make a demonstration. Conjuring an extremely powerful divine lightning, she disintegrates the poor blue jelly without mercy, with a smile on her face, leaving her master speechless. He knows she has 170 combat points, 17 times more than he does, and that she continues to be a goddess even if only half of one. Changing the subject, the Valkyrie mentions that her stomach growled and looks directly at the defeated creature's magic core. Kaito asks if she wants to eat the core, and she nods. Kaito had read somewhere that servants were fed with this substance, so he lets her eat it. As expected, the girl thanks him enthusiastically for replenishing her energy and calls her master to face another slime she detected, but he asks her to take a break. From what he observed, Sylphie gets hungry when she fights and needs to feed on the magic cores she gets, but since it's the only valuable thing in a slime, he would end up with nothing because he would have to feed the girl. In that case, he would run out of money for the insecticide, so he thinks of a plan and asks the servant to find new slimes. By doing so, he maintains his usual strategy of killing the creatures with the repellent, just having Sylphie detect their presence without expending energy in the fight. With that, he levels up to 4 and celebrates, plus his combat points go up by 2 points. Sylphie enthusiastically congratulates her master until he notices that he earned the title of Slime Exterminator, increasing his stats by 50% when facing a monster of that species. Obviously, this dampened the boy's excitement because being enhanced against a slime is like having 2 slippers to kill an ant instead of just 1. Sylphie tries to console her master, saying that having new skills is great and highlighting how incredible it is that he achieved that, and Kaito thinks it's nice of her to be like that, but something still bothers him deeply. The girl asks what it is, but he says it's nothing much. Then he announces that he will stop exploring the dungeon for today. Making a sad face, Sylphie asks if she will be summoned again, and he promises she will, which relieves the girl. Then he pulls out the card to return Sylphie inside. At the sales counter, Kaito impresses the employee with the amount of magic cores he collected in just 1 day of expedition, and he says he was lucky to find a bunch of slimes slimes at once. The woman believes him and emphasizes that he broke the record for slimes hunted in a single day and announces a value of 15,000 yen in exchange for all the items he collected. At night back home, Kaito Takagi still couldn't sleep in bed this time, reflecting on how powerful the Valkyrie actually is. With her, perhaps he can really go to the second floor, even though he's afraid of goblins. Many years ago, when he was a child, Kaito watched a live broadcast of Dungeon 37 on TV with Katsuragi, where the girl's father, Captain Katsuragi, tells the reporter that he intends to go to the deepest level of the dungeon and one day uncover the secret of these mysterious caves. The reporter comments on how the captain faces the unknown with courage and wisdom, and every word of that story enchanted young Kaito more and more, who didn't take his eyes off the television for a second. In sequence, Kaito wakes up from this dream and knows what he has to do. Thus, he prepares to go to the second level of the dungeon alongside Sylphie with improvised equipment. As always, the Valkyrie shows all her joy in participating in this expedition for the first time, and the boy makes it clear that he counts on her in this decisive moment. After all this time being content with slimes, Kaito descends the dungeon stairs towards a new challenge, and just like Captain Katsuragi, he promises to uncover the mysteries of the depths and become a hero just like the captain, while also pursuing another goal just as important. 15 years ago, two brothers finally discovered the mysterious entrance to a dungeons that began appearing all over the world. Alongside the special dungeon exploration group, these heroes planned to brave the dark recesses of the caves and uncover their secrets. Comprised of various professionals, this is the largest elite group on the face of the earth, ready to undertake any mission assigned to them. Entering the terrifying domain of monsters, the brothers showed no fear facing evil head-on with their powerful abilities against the monstrous creatures that appeared along the way, descending floor by floor into the malevolent depths of the unknown. Although they had not reached the deepest levels, the brothers planned to compensate their fans with an incredible theme park that perfectly simulated the known floors of the dungeon. With this, they hoped to pressure the government to allow 15-year-olds to obtain their hunter licenses, as they believed this was the optimal age. However, not everything was a vacation, and as the brothers progressed, the challenges increased drastically. Eventually, the young explorer couldn't withstand the cardboard dragon and ended up dying, but not before expressing his love for his little sister, who despaired at this dramatic moment. Determined, the girl promised to defy the laws of nature and bring her brother back to life with a super antidote. She then expelled the liquid into her mouth and pulled the boy close to pass the potion to his mouth in this incredible episode of Dungeon Love Story. Back to reality, Kaito Takagi didn't have the same vigor as the series brothers, and thus he grew tired and trembled with fear at the second floor of the dungeon. To offer her usual support, Sylphie held the boy's hand and calmed him down. Continuing the journey, the Valkyrie warned of a goblin around the corner, but given Kaito's bad experience with such creatures, he turned back and miraculously caught his breath as he sped away. However, the image of Captain Katsuragi flashed in his mind, causing him to slap his face to face the challenge and become a protagonist once and for all. Thus, even while stuttering and with a swollen face, he drew his wooden sword and promised to defeat the fearsome goblin. Turning the corner, there was the goblin napping. So Kaito handed the responsibility to the Valkyrie, who attempted a divine lightning strike. However, the boy stepped in front of her after realizing he needed to do this himself, but accepted her help if things got tough. He struck first with his sword, but missed, leaving an opening for a counterattack. Quickly, Kaito raised his shield and blocked the opponent's charge, and they contested the space shoulder to shoulder. Showing strength, he didn't know he had the boy knocked down the goblin and struck confidently, but the monster grabbed the sword and disarmed the adventurer. With no other choice, he drew his insecticide and sprayed it in the creature's eye, momentarily blinding it. After this brilliant strategy, Kaito retrieved his main weapon and went back on the offensive, stumbling along the way and luckily thrusting the sword into the goblin's belly, defeating it. In victory, the young boy couldn't contain his emotion and shed tears of joy for finally defeating his arch-enemy, while Sylphie celebrated her master's triumph enthusiastically. Additionally, Kaito leveled up and gained the provisional title of Goblin Exterminator, granted to those who had defeated a creature of that race and overcome the fear of dying against it, ensuring a 10% bonus to stats when facing that monster again. Since this victory was by luck, the effect is only provisional and weaker than the original. Kaito didn't know whether to be happy or feel humiliated by the system's accusation, but he didn't want to dwell on sadness at this moment, because intentionally funny or not, he killed a goblin, and no one could take that from him. Next, he advanced through the second floor with Sylphie's help and defeated other goblins, further boosting the inexperienced adventurer's confidence. While walking, Kaito discovered that the Valkyrie's only desire was to serve her master, as if something was programmed into her mind to make his servant more than just that. He promised to explore the dungeon and help her learn about the world around her. Continuing their journey together, the duo continued their goblin hunt, and Kaito fed the girl with the essences dropped by the monsters. After leaving the dungeon, Kaito was praised by the employee for bringing 4 goblin cores to the sales table on his first day. The next day, he stayed in bed late without lifting a finger, and his mother warned him he would waste the entire Sunday at this rate. Kaito explained that every muscle in his body ached, and he couldn't get up, so the woman asked him to take it easier on the job. The day after, he went to school beside Katsuragi, feeling like he had cement in his underwear. The girl immediately realized he had been to the dungeon again, but as he denied it, she asked why he had such muscle pain. He then said he had joined a gym to bulk up and ended up overdoing it. Katsuragi analyzed his impaired shape and commented that he wouldn't look good too muscular. Anyway, this was enough to change the subject, and Kaito felt relieved. At school, some girls were talking about the Dan brothers making a new movie set to release next year titled Summer Story of the Seven in the Dungeon. Simultaneously, Kaito told his friends he had crushed the goblins on the second floor, and the guys didn't expect that from him. Kaito felt offended, but at least gained confidence, which was enough for now. Now he dreams of reaching the deeper floors of the dungeon, so his friends warned him not to rush. Keeping up the pace, the adventurer returned to the cave again and explored an untouched corner of the second floor. As on the previous day, the cycle repeated, and they defeated the goblins that appeared, leaving Takeo exhausted for the next day. As time passed, he gradually improved his equipment, such as buying a tungsten bar to make his hunting more effective. When he arrived at school, the kid was a total deadweight, which increasingly bothered Katsuragi. Nonetheless, he didn't give up on his goal and kept returning to the dungeon daily. After much effort, he finally reached level 10, and amid Sylphie's enthusiastic applause, he was awarded the Divine Blessing, a title given to those loved by deities and similar beings. The bonus from the statistics increases as the user levels up, and the rate of this increase will depend on the love of that deity. In light of this, Kaito Takagi realizes he has gained an overpowered ability and celebrates his rise to prominence like never before. With this, he bows to Sylphie, the only deity he knows, and says that all this is thanks to her. Holding the young Valkyrie's hand, he hopes to rely on her even more from now on, and this is exactly the girl's wish, to be there for whatever her master needs. The way Kaito expressed himself enchanted the girl, who becomes even happier to discover some deeper feelings from that young man, so she states it is wonderful to have him as her master. Next, they encounter a glowing skeleton on their path, so Kaito questions if this glow is the effect of the divine blessing, or if the enemy is a rare monster. To defeat it, the two repeat a strategy that had been working well. The Valkyrie summons the Maiden's Wall, a magical shield that keeps the enemy at a distance, then Kaito delivers the final blow. However, this time, the tungsten bar can't handle the skeleton's hardness and causes no damage, so the boy asks the Valkyrie to use her divine lightning, annihilating the creature instantly. When the essence drops, Kaito is frustrated to discover that it has nothing special, even though the skeleton was rare, except for being a red stone, a color he didn't have before in this type of item. Behind him, Sylphie already wants to devour the stone, and upon receiving her meal, she jumps for joy, eating the best thing she has ever tasted. Later, upon leaving the dungeon, the staff member tells him that the red essence is worth 2 million yen, making the poor boy die of regret. At night, all he can think about is the 2 million that went up in smoke, or rather into Sylphie's stomach. As a consolation, he convinces himself that the Valkyrie deserved a tastier meal after all she had done for him. Speaking of which, he wonders whether he should descend to the third floor, as the second is already becoming easy, but hesitates as this floor has group monsters. The next day, already inside the cave, he tells Sylphie that he wants to fight alone, so the girl thinks she did something wrong and despairs, but he explains that he wants to go to the third floor and will end up becoming too dependent on the Valkyrie if he goes with her, and he doesn't want that. Speaking of which, he says he sees Sylphie not as a servant, but as a little sister he can always count on. To strengthen this relationship even more, he starts calling her Shyle, a nickname she loves more than anything, enchanted by having a master who cares so much for her. In the midst of this, a goblin appears in front of the two, so Kaito asks to handle the enemy alone. On leaving the dungeon, the staff member asks the adventurer not to overdo it, so he replies that the only dose he wants at the moment is a healing potion because he was massacred. At home, reading a magazine with the Dan brothers on the cover, Kaito laments having spent the money he managed to accumulate so far to buy a single healing potion that even at a low level is absurdly expensive. To make matters worse, he needed better equipment to descend to the 3rd floor and still gather magic cores for Shyle to eat. So he returns to his old days and sprays insecticide on every slime that crossed his path. Updating his friends on the latest events, they think the boy is regressing after having gone so far, but he assures them that slime hunting is just a temporary measure to save money. Hearing the word slime, Katsuragi questions what the boy has been up to, so he pretends he was actually talking about S-Lane, his 4th cousin. Like it or not, the lie works and Katsuragi leaves without further ado. The next day, the gelatinous monster slaughter gains another chapter, yielding so many crystals that Kaito was already accumulating them in a pouch. With the sale of this amount, he is sure he will be able to buy equipment and some cores will still be left for Shile's nourishment. That said, the Valkyrie senses a strange presence near them, so they investigate until they discover it was a silver slime lurking in the dungeon. Without wasting time, Kaito attacks the creature with his insecticide, but as it escaped, Shyle finishes the job with her lightning. Upon picking up the dropped item, Kaito was all smiles because in his hand was a new servant card, this time a Viscount level demon named Lucilia. Behind the boy, Shyle can't hide a pang of jealousy. Anyway, Kaito was worried about summoning a demon and causing some problem for himself, like being cursed or possessed. However, looking at Shyle, he thinks about the dream. It must be to summon a deity and a demon at the same time. With this in mind, he chooses to go this route and conjures the card's power, generating a great fire tornado that dissipates and reveals the demonic figure of Lucilia. The demon, who was in a non-physical state, passes through Kaito, who welcomes his newest servant with open arms. Within a few seconds, the summoned one appears in her younger form. To clear any doubts, Kaito asks the girl's name, and she confirms she is Lucilia, a demon of Viscount level. The young man expected something different when he saw the card's image, so he kneels and questions where his horned muse went. With no patience for his outburst, Lucilia comments that his master doesn't seem very trustworthy or intelligent. Shyle asks the little demon not to speak that way about the master, explaining that demons act impulsively, not out of malice. Taking advantage of the moment, the demon looks the Valkyrie up and down, and Sylphie happily says that she too serves Kaito. Since the boy is the master, Lucilia stretches out her hand and asks for food, but he complains that the freeloader hasn't done anything yet. To solve this problem, Shyle notices a slime nearby and steps up to show her worth. With the flames of destruction, she annihilates the poor slime, turning it to ashes. Kaito understands why she has 130 battle points. After the victory, Lucilia earns her deserved reward and extends her hand, asking for more food. Kaito checks her status and requests that she use the corrosive breath next time, then she receives another magic core. That said, she uses the ability on a dungeon goblin, leaving Kaito and Shyle in shock at the horror of the scene. After eating the goblin core, Lucilia finds it tastier and assumes that the cores of stronger monsters are more delicious, so she rushes to descend to the next floor. Kaito explains that on this floor monsters appear in groups, so they would need to acquire new weapons first, but the demon doesn't want to hear any excuses. Shyle intervenes, saying that the master does this for their benefit, so Lucilia gives up, insisting seeing it won't lead anywhere. But since that's the case, Kaito promises that tomorrow they will challenge the 3rd floor together. The next day, the group descends and the boy shows off an expensive crossbow he bought, but Lucilia warns that just because it's expensive doesn't mean it's good. Either way, only time will tell who's right, and soon after they encounter 2 hellhounds. Kaito tries to take down the first, but misses the shot. The hounds chase the humans, so Shyle protects the master with her magic shield. Then Kaito asks Lucilia to attack, and with the flames of destruction, she takes down the hounds in the blink of an eye and devours her reward. Having defeated both enemies, she demands both cores, but Kaito says there won't be any left for Shile. Either way, they continue their path, gathering more cores. Luceria warns that if he's lying, she'll throw him into the inferno. After that moment, the team continues until they encounter two wild boars. Confident, the demoness casts her usual spell, but this time one of the enemies emerges unscathed from the flames. Kaito steps in and hits the boar in the eye, enraging it even more as it charges towards the group. Fear causes the boy to fall, but in a panic he fires again and hits the boar in the forehead, ending it. While Shile praised the master's performance, Luceria mocked the fact that he had fallen. In the midst of this, the young man notices he has leveled up to 11 and celebrates, but the demon is only interested in more cores to fill her stomach. After this expedition, Kaito laments that he didn't earn much money because Luceria always wanted more food. Next to him, a group of young girls celebrates their successful descent to the 6th floor, making the boy think he might be able to do the same and seek more valuable rewards. One day later, lost in these thoughts, Kaito's attention is called by his friends. They think Kaito is considering which school to invest in after graduation, as this is the main concern of any serious student, until Katsuragi joins the conversation thinking this is the topic. To avoid embarrassment, Kaito pretends he was thinking about that exact subject, but gets flustered when the girl asks which school he chose. He throws the question back at her, and she says she would like to go to the Aoka Institute. He takes the opportunity to pretend he wants to go there too, cheering up his friend as they've always been together since kindergarten. At that moment, a friend calls Haruka to help organize some papers, so the girl leaves. Back on the 3rd floor of the dungeon, Luceria continued to decimate the opponents in front of her, always eager to devour each core that dropped from her victories. With divine lightning, Shile didn't lag behind in terms of strength, and the demon's corrosive breath remained useful in battle despite not being visually pleasant for others. Anyway, the master kept feeding his pupils with Luceria, always asking for more. On one of these occasions, Shile looks strangely at Kaito, who notices but says nothing. As her colleague got more and more food, the Valkyrie maintained that look, so the boy decides to ask what's going on. She pretends nothing is wrong, but reflecting on it in the bath, the boy realizes it was as if she were avoiding him. On TV, the Dan siblings girl did not accept how a newcomer treated her brother, so she decided to settle the differences in a duel. Kaito begins to imagine what it would be like if his two pupils decided to do the same, and thinking about it causes the young man to despair, having no idea what he would do if the situation reached that extreme. The next day, the poor guy has huge dark circles under his eyes, and Katsuragi already imagines what happened when they meet on their way to school, so she offers to help. Kaito lies, saying that Shinji and Hayato have befriended completely different girls, and the quieter girl doesn't seem to like the bolder one, so he wonders how to make everyone get along. Katsuragi advises him to ask the person directly instead of making assumptions, and Kaito relates this advice to the Shile situation. So when he returns to the dungeon, he summons only Shile to talk to her. Getting straight to the point, he asks if the Valkyrie likes Luceria, and she replies that she found her colleague a bit intimidating at first, but she said she didn't mean any harm. Therefore, Shile considers Luceria a kind girl and adores her. So the master asks if there's any other problem, because he cares a lot about the Valkyrie and doesn't want her to be unhappy by his side. With that, Shile spills the beans and says that the master is nice to Luceria all the time and wishes he would be that way with her too. She argues that the demon gets way more cores than she does. Before Luceria arrived, the Valkyrie felt much closer to the master. In other words, she wants Kaito to talk to her more. Realizing this, the boy understands that even these mythical creatures can feel jealous. Anyway, he promises to give the same number of magic cores to both of them and to talk more with Sylphie. Putting his promise into action, after their first victory of the day, both girls get the same portion, and Kaito praises the Valkyrie's participation. The demon isn't happy about this, as the master has never praised her for anything, so he does the same for the other girl to balance things out again. Next, after defeating another wild boar, Shile levels up, which increases her stats and grants her 2 more spells. Kaito praises the girl, and this time even Luceria concedes and gives her some credit. To show off her increased strength, Shile uses divine lightning on 3 hellhounds at once, defeating them all. As for Maiden's Wall, its duration was increased. Luceria offers to finish off the boar, but Kaito himself decides to practice his aim. When it comes to the reward, Kaito gives the 2 cores to Shile, leaving Luceria outraged because she didn't help in the battle only because the master didn't let her. On top of that, Shile admits that she's not satisfied with just 2 and asks asks for one more. Leaving the dungeon, Kaito laments the fact that the Valkyrie's appetite has grown along with her level. The woman who handles the exchanges notices that the boy has been bringing in fewer cores, which makes him even more irate. In these moments of difficulty, it's time to return to basics. With that in mind, Kaito goes after the slimes. After defeating the 25th one, Luceria asks to help out, but he replies that he won't be able to accumulate anything if the demon gets involved. Since that's the case, she says she shouldn't even be summoned, to which Shyle eagerly comments that would be great because she could cheer for her master without being interrupted. Kaito uses this to teach Luceria that he's only able to do all this because he has the support of both of them, and this phrase touches her in some way, even though she doesn't like to admit it. Later, the nosy woman comments that the adventurer has only been bringing slime cores, and he responds that he decided to reminisce about the old days. She mentions that Kaito must be ready to descend to the 4th floor. When he gets home, he researches stronger equipment on the internet to reach this more challenging floor and finds a full carbon nanotube suit, but it costs 5,000 yen. As he needs a lot of money, Kaito returns to the dungeon and finds a metallic blue slime, a special monster also related to the divine blessing ability. Wasting no time, he summons the girls to deal with the creature, and the two seem to be getting along better after what the master said about needing both of their support. Working as a team, they defeat the slime. Kaito is eager to grab his dropped servant card and rushes to the slime's loot. However, when he gets there, there's a magic orb which can turn him into a mage. There's no way he intends to sell the orb, so he throws it on the ground and activates its components, generating a mana layer that envelops the user and triggers a reaction in his body. Checking his menu, Kaito Takagi notes that he gained the water ball ability and gets excited about his new talent. To test the spell, Kaito approaches a hellhound and asks Shyle to open her magic shield. If he can't defeat the enemy, he asks Luceria to intervene with the flames of destruction. With the strategy set, the Valkyrie activates the Maiden's Wall, giving the master comfort to experiment with the water ball on the dog, but the attack simply doesn't cause any damage. Thus, Luceria solves the problem once and for all, while Kaito wonders if that was really magic. To console the master, Shyle says the magic will improve over time, while Luceria comments that the guy will never have to get out of bed to drink water again. Hearing this, he lowers his head and realizes it would have been better to sell the orb. At night, he goes alone to the park near the school to lament, and coincidentally Katsuragi was nearby. She asks what's wrong with him, and distracted, the boy replies that it's the magic. Realizing the mistake, he tries to correct it by saying he was talking about the movie The Magic Girl because he saw it and it wasn't what he expected. The girl argues that this movie got great reviews, so Kaito changes the subject and asks to walk her home. On the way, he thanks her for the advice about asking the person directly instead of assuming, because thanks to that he solved his problem. With that, Katsuragi replies that the problem was with him after all. The boy insists it was an issue with Shinji and Hayato, but the girl says goodbye and goes inside. Inside, she shows her frustration with the conversation, while Kaito begins to suspect that even she is jealous. The next day, the adventurer returns to the dungeon, this time to practice his newest spell. Just like yesterday, all he can conjure is a ridiculous water ball that hits the wall and explodes like a soap bubble. While Shyle is worried about the boy overexerting himself, Luceria is already imagining the bright future of this talented mage. Ignoring the little devil, Kaito resumes conjuring the water ball and ends up fainting from exhaustion. Back home, the kid was extremely tired. After passing out soundly, he dreams again of his childhood hero, Captain Katsuragi. When he was a child, Kaito wanted nothing more than to become that man in the future. So when he wakes up, he knows he can't give up now. With that in mind, he returns to the dungeon and resumes his training, and soon the water balls start showing improvement, hitting the wall with more power. After hours of repeating the same spell, he gets tired again, but maintains the determination needed to get up once more and continue training. Now he tries to form a cube out of the water ball, and with the Valkyrie cheering him on, he succeeds and celebrates excitedly, even though Luceria doesn't see much in this nonsense. Despite being on the brink of exhaustion, the kid insists on training and almost dies. Leaving the dungeon, he celebrates the fact that he is controlling his mana better, but he is still frustrated because he is leaving the training exhausted. Stumbling from fatigue, the boy trips and falls onto a girl's shoulder. The group of girls is worried about him, but he says he's fine and continues on his way. As he walks away, the oldest of the three Eri comments that some people really overdo it with training, but Hikarin, the youngest, believes that only those who push themselves to the limit can learn the most. Mikyu, with her cathood, thinks that such people just like to suffer. The next day, Kaido is sleeping soundly in class as usual, but this time the teacher shows up to scold him. Startled, the boy wakes up shouting that he will train hard again today, causing the teacher to frown even more, while the whole class bursts into laughter and Katsuragi looks on with concern. After this class, Shinji and Hayato go to talk with the slime exterminator, and he explains that he's been training some essential skills to conquer a dungeon, even though he ends up tired every single day, which is why he spends every class counting sheep. As expected, Katsuragi butts into the conversation to ask once again if Kaido is going to the dungeon, as she had been listening in. He lies, saying he was actually talking about a crazy dance move he's been practicing. Hearing this, Katsuragi asks him to show her the move one day and leaves. Later there, he is again sending out water balls. This time, he shoots the spell straight into a goblin's mouth, suffocating the creature to death. Shile praises the master's brilliant strategy, and Luceria mocks him for finally using his head for something useful. However, despite the effort, Kaido can no longer gain experience points from killing monsters on the 3rd floor, so he needs to go deeper if he wants to truly level up. With that, he calls on the girls to descend to the 4th floor, also because he might have saved enough money to buy that cool outfit he found online. Sure enough, he returns to the cave wearing his new armor, despite the young demon thinking it's the ugliest thing ever. Kaido complains that it was very expensive, but at least Shile really liked the outfit as expected. The master argues that this beauty has carbon nanotubes capable of protecting every part of the body despite the material being thin and still hurting him. Not believing what she heard, Luceria asks what the point of this thing is. He explains that, for example, if a sharp arrow flies toward him, he would certainly die, but with this armor he can withstand the lethal damage. Additionally, it came with a bracelet that makes his spells stronger, at least that's what the product description said in the store. Shile notes that buying such armor is cool, but the little devil thinks her master should have tested it before buying. With less patience, he explains that you can't do that when you buy online. Then he pulls a lotion from his pocket to show another advantage of the combo, but Luceria was already dragging Shile away from there. With the conversation over, they head to the 4th floor, and the Valkyrie senses a presence that gives her chills. Taking a look at what it was, there stood her worst nightmare, a gigantic cockroach. So the child's first reaction was to cast a divine lightning, while her friend joins the massacre by throwing flames of destruction at the insect. After killing the monster and running away in panic, Kaido is left behind. Hearing footsteps approaching them, the girls prepare their spells to smash another giant insect, but this time it was their poor master. Immediately, Shile starts crying while Luceria complains that he just stood there watching them fight alone. To make up for his mistake, the master shows the magical cores to the girls to absorb, and despite her usual drama, Luceria's stomach growls and she gives in to lunch. However, the taste was awful, so the two pupils were not very motivated to work in exchange for that horrible core. After the meal, Kaido wants to move on to the 5th floor, but first he wants to know if there are any monsters nearby. Shile warns that there are 2 coming from one direction, so the human discovers through the system that they are the Madman and Sandman. Without wasting time, he shoots an arrow at one of them, but the projectile passes through the muddy creature's body without causing any injuries. After repeating the shot against the other enemy, Kaido sees the same effect happening, putting his physical integrity at risk with a counterattack. Then Shile steps in with the Maiden's Wall and saves the master. From what he could see, physical attacks don't work against this type of monster, so Luceria does the basics and unleashes the flames of destruction on the opponents. After the victory, Kaido again offers the horrendous cores to the girls, but this time they refuse. Faced with this, Kaido decides to go home after a day with little success, as they didn't find many monsters. Speaking of which, he asks Shile if she senses any presence, and all she feels is a wall that the boy thinks is ordinary. To prove she's not there for nothing, the Valkyrie blows up the wall and reveals a secret entrance. Giving up on leaving, Kaido asks the girls to be careful, as there might be traps in this part of the dungeon, and without delay, Luceria activates a false floor that triggers an arrow shot. In a desperate attempt to save the little demon, the boy ends up taking the arrow arrow to his stomach. He rolls on the ground, but quickly gets up remembering he didn't buy the new outfit for nothing. Continuing their walk, the boy reminds the girls that they must be very careful where they step, so Luceria causes more trouble by activating another trap. This time Kaito manages to dodge, but ends up electrocuted by activating another. For some reason, the shock makes the boy feel better than before, so he pulls himself together and asks Luceria why she was showing so much concern when she always mocks everything that happens to him. After being terrified by the possibility of dying, the demon crosses her arms again and pretends to be cold and calculating. Then Shile senses another presence behind a door, this time quite different from the others. Fed up, Kaito turns around to go home, but the girls seem determined to continue despite everything. Since he depends on them for everything, the guy has no choice but to stay, so Shile blows up the door, making Kaito beg not to be charged for the damage later. Advancing down this path, the group comes face to face with a giant slime and an ogre, so the boy asks the girls to defeat the ogre first. The two use their usual magic against the enemy, but the monster emerges from the explosion unscathed. The creature charges at the team, so the Valkyrie activates the maiden's wall to protect everyone. Discovering that at least the barrier works to hold off the giant, Kaito tells Luceria to take care of the slime and attempts a physical attack on the ogre, considering that the magic attack didn't work. This time the arrow hits the enemy's leg and knocks him down. Kaito seizes the moment and shoots several times, but his ammunition runs out. Thus the ogre resumes its attack against Shile's barrier, and to make matters worse, the slime is also immune to magical attacks, leaving Luceria in trouble. Faced with this, Kaito resorts to his only option, which is the water ball. However, when conjuring this magic, the water turns into ice. Imagining it's the bracelet's effect, he launches several ice balls at the ogre, causing significant damage, but the young man's mana is running out. Therefore, he needs a stronger shot, and focusing on this, he invokes an ice spear that pierces the beast's eye, and the second one the middle of its forehead, defeating the ogre. Now they turn to the giant slime, and Kaito asks Shile to use the Divine Lance Rogenate while he holds the monster with his shield. Before the master's defense melted, the Valkyrie throws the weapon's magic at the creature, blowing off the top part of its body, but its HP remains the same. Injured, Kaito thinks of retreating, but remembers Captain Katsuragi and decides he won't give up on this fight. Determined, he charges at the slime and uses his most classic strategy against this species, insecticide. Using the maiden's wall for defense, the group sees the slime's HP plummeting, so Kaito ups the ante by pulling out his dual jet pistols, increasing the dose of poison and killing the enemy. After the victory, the master uses the lotion to recover his health and sees his demon pupil level up, besides reaching level 15 himself. After that, they search for the magic cores and collect the red stone from the ogre. A bit further ahead, Kaito sees a rare magic sword that looked more like a kitchen knife, according to Luceria. Taking it to the sales counter, the woman asks where he found it, and he informs her it was in the secret dungeon on the 5th floor after defeating two monsters that seemed like bosses. The dungeon employee has no idea where this secret passage is, so Kaito shows the location on the map. The woman says she'll notify her superiors about it and informs him that the special red core is worth a lot. Moreover, since the boy is doing so well in the dungeon, she invites him to participate in next week's event, where investigators will go on an expedition to the 7th floor. After accepting the invitation, Kaito wastes no time and tells the whole story to his friends to show off, as he'll join a group for the first time. Jumping on the bandwagon, Katsuragi asks if it's some dance group, and this time Shinji confirms the lie to ease his friend's situation. Thus, Katsuragi falls for the lie again and asks to be invited to watch the performance. Later, Kaito goes after his team for the expedition and discovers that they are the girls he met a few days ago. The next day, Haruka dreamed about her father, who promised to come home early from work so they could have dinner together. Brimming with joy, the child waved goodbye to Captain Katsuragi. When she woke up, Haruka felt something strange. After having breakfast, she said goodbye to her mother to go study at Yumi's house. Before starting her walk, she wondered what Kaito was doing at that moment. Maybe he was practicing dance, as he said he had been doing. In reality, the boy was beginning the exploration event. After waiting their turn in line, Kaito's group gathered in a magic circle known as the Transfer Gate to be teleported to the 6th floor of the dungeon. Upon reaching their destination, Kaito let out a sigh of relief, because it was only the second time he had used the transfer gate and was a bit anxious about it. Similarly, the girls were also tense. A little further ahead, a dungeon staff member pointed the way to the 7th floor and mentioned that the event should last about 3 hours. Before going down the stairs, the group stopped at a convenience store to buy necessary items for the expedition. After leaving the store, Kaito packed his purchases in his backpack, but noticed that the girls were carrying very little. Actually, each of them had a magic bag that allowed them to carry dozens of items more than the boy without any effort. Kaito commented that you could buy an apartment with the value of those bags, and they responded that their father had bought them. Coming from wealthy families, the girls could easily equip themselves with high-end gear, while Kaito had to humble himself against slimes to scrape together coins. Miku commented that the boy's armor was just a second skin, so Hikari scolded the cat ears for saying whatever came to her mind without a filter. Soon Eri drew a naginata from her bag and announced it was time to descend to the 7th floor. Once there, Kaito asked what kind of monsters appeared in that area, and Miku responded that they were mostly golems. The boy commented that the girl had done her homework, and she believed it was the basic strategy for the game. Kaito agreed, though he didn't see it as a game. Suddenly, they all heard noises in the dungeon and became alert, thinking they were golems, but as the shadows approached, they were revealed to be 4 dungeon guardians staff responsible for the protection, cleaning, and maintenance of the cave, who were very polite to the adventurers on expeditions. Hikaru had great respect for these professionals and the service they provided. Since it was a moment of pause, Kaito took the opportunity to get to know his group mates better. He mentioned that he was at level 16 and asked Eri about her level, to which she responded she was at 18. Miku was at 15, just like Hikaru, but the younger girl had 75 MP points, which was double Kaito's, leaving him astonished. The conversation was cut short when rocks in the cave levitated to form the body of a stone golem. Eri took the lead and positioned herself at the front, asking Hikari to prepare spells and Miku to protect the spellcaster. To fit Kaito into the strategy, who felt out of place among the group that had worked together for a long time, the leader asked him to protect her. Then she charged at the golem using her mobility to avoid being hit by the monster. After circling the golem looking for an opportunity to strike, the warrior managed to flirt with the attack a few times but couldn't land a strong enough blow. After several failed attempts, Eri finally adjusted her weapon to deliver the blow that ended the fight. Kaito was impressed with what he saw, while the friends showed their pride for their leader. However, the problem seemed far from over when another enemy appeared before the team. This time, a bronze golem challenged the visitors, and knowing it was a more powerful opponent than the previous one, Eri commanded Hikaru to prepare her spell once and for all to provide support. After reciting the right words, the girl invoked Earth Wave, a magic that softened the rocky surface of the dungeon like water enveloping the golem. Miku used her snatch card, a small animal capable of attacking with above average speed, making it almost impossible for a big slow opponent like the golem to hit it. After running to the golem's back, Snatch used an ability that damaged the monster and slowed it down. Then Hikari attacked with Fire Ray, making Kaito realize what 75 MP points could accomplish with those 2 consecutive spells. Finally, with the bronze golem already injured, Eri attacked with her naginata and finished the job. Continuing the threat, now an iron golem approached the humans. Kaito reacted with his crossbow, but the monster's carcass was too tough to be penetrated by such a projectile. The golem chose Hikari as its first target, so Miku stepped in front of her friend to protect her, although it didn't seem like it would help much. However, Eri appeared and deflected the monster's arm with her weapon, preventing a tragedy. Then the leader leaped at the enemy and struck its head, even though not even her naginata could penetrate the monster's armor. Hikari used her Fire Ray in an attempt to break through the armor, but again the attack had little effect. Miku used Snatch to repeat the same strategy against the bronze golem, but the iron one wasn't hit when the animal attacked from behind with its ability. Seeing this, Kaito had no choice but to invoke Shyle and Luceria, so he reached into his pocket for his cards. In the meantime, he dropped the magic sword Baltzard, which according to his internet research was capable of causing the imagined damage when attacking. Whether true or not, the boy intended to put it to the test before invoking his cards. With Baltzard in hand, hand, he imagined his enemy being defeated with one strike and hoped it would work. For his strategy to succeed, he asked Hikari to cast her earth wave, which she did. Then he asked Eri to keep the golem distracted. With that done, he went to the iron golem's back and pierced its carcass with a magic sword, defeating the enemy. From then on, Kaido looked at Baltzar differently after the great feat. Later, the group gathers for tea, and the girls can't help but point out the impressive item the boy is holding. Additionally, Mikyu mentions that Snatch liked the boy, and he is surprised by this, especially since he has never seen a carbuncle before. This is because servants are not registered by the dungeon cameras according to Snatch's master. Kaido didn't know this, but now he understands why he had never seen one before, or why no staff ever asked about Shyle and Luceria. He then asks if only the three of them know about Snatch's existence, but since Mikyu bought the card at an auction and registered it with the guild, everyone knows. Changing the subject, Eri had already talked to the girls before and invites Kaido to join the team because they plan to reach the 11th floor where the second transfer gate is located, considering that there is one of these gates every 5 floors. Kaido thanks her for the invitation, but doesn't believe he could contribute much to the group. In his mind, he's just an ordinary guy who adventures occasionally. On the other hand, the girls don't see anything wrong with that and even assure him that they would feel safer with him around. As the boy remains undecided, Eri asks if he has other people to form a group with, and he replies that they are not exactly people, but he fears delving into the subject and appearing like a lunatic walking around with 2 little girls. Just imagining this, Kaido already hears the siren in his head. Therefore, he asks for some time to think about it and promises to come back with an answer once he has decided. After the event, Kaido returns to his regular expeditions with Shyle and Luceria. Clearly, the two are in a bad mood, knowing that Kaido was invited to this group, with the other girls making them feel left out. Hurt, the demon questions why the master continues to call her Luceria when he gave Shyle a cute nickname. Embarrassed, the boy tries to come up with a nickname for her, starting with Lua, then Seri, until finally arriving at Luce. The little devil finds all the suggestions extremely distasteful, but since she doesn't have much choice, she ends up accepting Luce. After resolving the matter, Kaido was about to explain about forming a group, but his 2 pupils rush ahead, ignoring the master. The next day, the boy takes his usual walk with Katsuragi towards the school. His friend asks if he spent the weekend rehearsing some dance moves or working out, so he lies, saying he did both. Taking advantage of the moment, she asks the boy out for the next weekend. Kaido feels embarrassed, but Haruka clarifies that it's just to go shopping, which eases his anxiety a bit. Ahead, Katsuragi sees her friend Yuma and goes after her. Likewise, Shinji and Hayato appear behind Kaido like dementors, wanting to know about this outing with the girl. Kaido argues that it's not really a date and that he's just going to accompany his friend shopping, so the two place their hands on the comrade's shoulders, clearly intending to say that the innocent one knows nothing. Changing the subject, they want to know how the event went, and upon learning that Kaido met with 3 girls, they start thinking that this dungeon talk might be more interesting than they imagined, so they consider returning to explore. Days later, on the promised outing, Kaido waits for Katsuragi at her doorstep and accompanies her to the subway station, where a large screen displays a scene from the Dan brothers. Kaido focuses his full attention on what's playing on the screen, so his friend comments that he really likes this dungeon stuff, but wishes he would forget about it for today. Seeing no problem with this, Kaido agrees, and the two set off to shop. At the market, Haruka comments that it's been a long time since they went out together, because when they were little, her father, Captain Katsuragi, took them to various places like the beach, the movies, and camping. Speaking of which, the girl gets excited at the thought that they could watch a movie together once again. Shortly after, the girl is trying on some clothes in a store and asking for Kaido's opinion, to which he always responds in the exact same way with the same words, saying she looks pretty. Then they go to a park to enjoy the sun a bit more. Under the fresh air, Katsuragi stretches her arms up high, making Kaido imagine that this scene could easily be a painting. The girl comments that a dog walking in the park is beautiful, and Kaido agrees, but Kaido didn't see any dog. To enjoy the outing, the two rent a boat to row on the river, and Katsuragi comments that the fish are wonderful. Kaido agrees, but Kaido didn't see any fish. Deep down, he knows this is a date, but he shakes his head to clear that thought because he doesn't believe believe Haruka would ever invite him out. Meanwhile, she comments that her friend seems more fit because of the gym and dancing, and the shameless one agrees. Later, they share a milkshake and even swap ice creams to taste each other's. On the way back home, Kaito gets lost in another Dan Brothers ad at the station, while Katsuragi sees a mother with her little daughter and asks them to visit one more place before leaving. Together, the two arrive at the entrance of the dungeon construction site where her father is in the underground. That day, he promised to have dinner with his daughter, but never returned. For this reason, she doesn't understand why people risk themselves in that dungeon. Saying this, the girl calls Kaito to leave, and he thinks to himself that he understands his friend's concern, but his dream will always be to follow in Captain Katsuragi's footsteps. As the days went by, Kaito was already showing off and channeling his water magic into Baltzard's blade. After casting the spell, instantly creating a sword, he sliced a golem in half and announced that this ability was called the Ice Magic Blade. As always, Shyle clapped with immense enthusiasm and asked Luce if she also thought that the master was becoming extremely powerful. If the Valkyrie was predictable, so was the demoness, which is why she questioned if there was some girl the boy was trying to impress with all these moves. Shyle took the bait and with tears in her eyes asked if the master was going to replace them with the three girls. Before Kaito could respond, Shyle apologized if she wasn't doing enough and promised to do everything to surpass her limits, but the boy wasn't dissatisfied with them. The problem was that he couldn't justify himself. Luce accused the poor guy of discarding them just because they ate magic cores like they were chocolate. Seeing that he was at risk of dying right then and there, Kaito decided to give up on the other group and promised to keep things as they always were. However, Shyle wanted the girls to join the group if her master wanted, because she would support any decision he made. Luceria sighed and gave up trying to control the situation as long as she could keep devouring magic cores. Anyway, Shyle would love to know why Kaito wanted to invite those girls to the group, and he replied that he hoped to evolve alongside them. Moreover, if he didn't become stronger, the boy feared being abandoned by his two servants because they were extremely powerful. Shyle lightened the mood by emphasizing that she was proud of her master's efforts, so Kaito felt secure forming the group with the humans only on weekends. Once everything was discussed, even though he had the permission of a deity and a demoness, the boy was much more afraid of the three girls, it seemed. So much so that he froze in front of his phone and couldn't call Eri, the oldest of them. To his surprise, Haruka Katsuragi called him and gave the protagonist a scare. She wanted to talk about something with him, but first Kaito asked for advice on how to ease his nervousness, lying that his friends wanted to call some girls but couldn't. Haruka then told him that a while ago, when she was a child, her father saw her admiring a piano on a stage. He approached and asked if she could play it, but the girl lacked confidence and ended up crying because she didn't think she could. Her father dried her tears and pulled a smile from her face with his fingers. From then on, he proved that nervousness was gone and joy came. This was the trick Haruka learned to deal with that feeling. Since the lesson came from Captain Katsuragi, Kaito felt it would work. After getting what he wanted, the rest of the conversation went off track, and the girl hung up without saying why she had called. Dumbfounded, Kaito didn't mind and started practicing the trick while Haruka observed a dress in her room. Meanwhile, Jinguji Eri was sweating profusely as she executed precise movements with her naginata, creating a sound in the air that proved the strength of her arms. In the middle of her training, Takagi Kaito called. He talked about the plan to meet only on weekends, which was fine for the girls because they had classes during the week, making it easier to go on expeditions on Saturdays and Sundays. Speaking of which, Eri invited Kaito to meet at the guild at 10 the next Saturday. With the meeting arranged, Kaito hung up and felt relieved for managing to call, all thanks to Katsuragi. When the weekend arrived, the quartet gathered for their debut expedition, and Kaito shone, taking responsibility for defeating the two golems on the left, leaving the last two for the rest of the team. Showing leadership, he instructed Hikarin to use her Earth Wave, while Mikyu was to call Snatch to keep the opponents in check. The Earth Wave soon hindered the golems' mobility, giving the speedy Snatch an advantage in distracting them. Kaito used his Ice Magic Blade technique and defeated the first enemy. Then he was attacked by the second, so he dodged and launched into a fatal slash, killing the monster instantly. On the other side, Snatch eliminated the third adversary, and Eri took on the fourth, finishing the fight with her naginata. After the victory, the girls were curious about the boy's spell, as he had called the magic water ball, but it wasn't a sphere. Kaito explained that he invented a technique called Ice Magic Blade by combining magic strike with the baltzard sword. Eri praised both this ability and Kaito's leadership in the fight, assuming he already had experience with it. Since he couldn't reveal the Valkyrie and the demoness in his pocket, Kaito tried to change the subject at all costs, commenting on how elegant and efficient Eri was with that naginata in action. She fell for it and replied that she had been practicing since she was young, and now it was almost like it was part of her body. Speaking of body parts, the boy's stomach started growling loudly, so he invited the group to eat. Hours later, back home, Kaito remembered what the girls had eaten during that break. Only expensive and refined foods, while he was the lowly one and made do as best he could. When the expedition ended, they said they wanted to move to the 8th floor the next day, and Kaito was excited about the idea of finally reaching the strongest floor for him so far. With Sunday arriving, Kaito showed up to the group wearing a life jacket, leaving the girls a bit confused. He explained that some monsters living in the water appeared on the 8th floor, so he came prepared for everything. Besides, this wasn't just any life jacket. Not only would it keep him floating on the surface like a dead fish, but this beauty could also withstand magic attacks, so Kaito killed 2 birds with 1 stone. As they continued along the path, Snatch walked ahead to detect enemies. Before long, the animal sensed the presence of an aquatic beast that exhaled a corrosive substance onto Kaito's supposed armor. Eri told him to take it off before something bad happened, and he complied, watching his expensive life-saving gear go to the heaven of vests. Witnessing this brutal scene, the boy swore vengeance for the vest, but it was Miku who pierced the monster's forehead with his crossbow. Kaito asked if the girl had used this weapon before to shoot so well, but she had never used it in her life. Thus, the team continued their journey through the dungeon's 8th floor. There, they faced all kinds of fierce and giant animals, until at one point a squid tossed Kaito into the water. Without his life vest, he was sure he would become fish food, but Eri pointed out that he was in the shallow end. Crazy as he was, he only cared about where the monster that attacked him went, but Hikarin had already grilled a squid in the other corner. Speaking of which, the youngest member of the team asked if the man really knew how to swim, so he scratched his neck without answering, giving a sheepish smile as a response. Regardless, the journey continued, and the group started to bond, beginning with the newest member who demonstrated great skill using his rifle and the ice magic blade to eliminate the enemies that appeared. Eri, more old school, wielded her classic naginata to face the obstacles. Miku explored her new talent, showing great efficiency with the crossbow, even though she didn't know how to shoot just minutes before. Lastly, Hikari wreaked havoc on the battlefield with her fire ray while keeping a safe distance. When the last fight ended after an intense battle, Kaito succumbed to exhaustion and collapsed on the ground. Sometime later, the young adventurer woke up and asked what had happened to him. Noticing he was in Eri's lap, he was startled and impulsively apologized. Looking at his menu, the boy noticed his mana points had been restored. Eri explained that they had given him a magic potion, and Kaito regretted making them use such a valuable item. However, the three emphasized that they were a team now and needed to work together. Besides, killing all those tunas had yielded a good amount of magic cores. In the midst of this, Snatch alerted them to another danger, and this time Miku noticed greater stress in the animal, as if something more threatening than usual was near. The suspicion was confirmed when a colossal dinosaur emerged from the water's depths. The most obvious reaction was to flee, which the four humans did, but the monster wouldn't let that happen. As it crawled after its victims with its vast body, the tremors caused a collapse that blocked the exit. Thus, there was no alternative but to fight. Once again, Kaito took the lead, now instructing Mika to use Snatch for long-range attacks. Hikarin was to use magic to immobilize the monster, and Eri was responsible for striking the enemy while Kaito distracted it. With a strategy defined, they had to put it into practice. With the departure of the two frontline members, the mage cast the earth wave, followed by an attack from Snatch. However, this tactic did not cause any damage to the opponent this time. Kaito approached the beast and pierced its shell with his ice sword, giving Eri space to stab its head. Despite all the effort, the monster threw the warrior away, taking her out of the battle. Even so, she tried to reach her weapon and continue the fight because her deepest desire was to become a heroine. Faced with this, Kaito had no choice but to invoke his two secret cards, Luceria and Sylphie, who when they appeared in the area promised to make the monster regret attacking their master. The Valkyrie began by launching the divine lightning along with the demoness's flame of destruction. The combination of the two powers resulted in a devastating charge, hitting the dinosaur squarely, ending the conflict. With that done, Shyle ran to see how her master was while Luce confirmed that a woman was indeed involved in this whole story. Miku wasted no time and hugged the Valkyrie in gratitude, while Hikari, more restrained, asked to touch the demon's hair, which she refused at first. The little girl insisted so sweetly that the demonic entity found herself cornered until she allowed it. The human girl got emotional as she rubbed Luceria's silky hair against her face. Before long, the four began to form a bond of friendship and decided to bathe together, which Eri thought was a fantastic idea. They found a place to bathe and further strengthen their bonds. Miku was already calling the Valkyrie Shile, and Hikari managed, using her angelic face, to convince Luceria to let her be called by the nickname too. Eri didn't want to be left behind and asked if she had permission to call the entities the same way. Once she got approval, the team was finally formed, and the older woman stood up in excitement. Meanwhile, Kaito took a much quieter bath with Snatch. Then everyone said their goodbyes and Kaito was left alone with Eri. The boy mentioned what Eri had said when she was thrown by the dinosaur. She was trying to reach her Naginata while stating that she would be a heroine. Jinguji Eri then explained that she had been training since she was little, and her father taught her that it was necessary to become strong to ensure the protection of those she loved and to oppose all injustice. According to him, those who followed this path were called heroes, and since then that's all Eri had wanted to become. Changing the subject, she mentioned that there would be an event over the weekend at her university campus, the Alka Institute, and invited her new friend to attend. Without wasting time, Kaito told his partners about this invitation. Since it was an open event, he could invite someone to go, but they didn't seem interested, so they suggested Haruka, especially since the two had gone out together before. Kaito was terrified of facing such a situation, so his friends gave him a little push and invited Haruka on his behalf. Katsuragi was happy to have been invited, although she had already planned to go since she and Kaito intended to enroll in the same university. Days later, Kaito went to pick up his friend at her house, and she wore the dress he had chosen at that clothing store they had gone to together. The first thing Kaito notices is how beautiful his companion looks. Before stepping out of the house, Haruka bids farewell to her parents and leaves with the boy. Shortly after boarding the train to the campus event, Haruka takes the initiative and asks Kaito to sit closer to her. To start a conversation, she thanks him for the invitation, but the boy reminds her that she would have gone even if he hadn't invited her. That's how the protagonist fell into the girl's trap, as she comments that it's much better for them to go together. Kaito agrees, but tries his best to convince himself that this isn't a date. Feeling much more at ease, Haruka can hardly wait to visit the Alka Institute. Suddenly, the duo Shinji and Hayato express the same desire, appearing unexpectedly in the front seat. Kaito doesn't understand why the guys are going along, as they certainly aren't the type to be interested in checking out a university, which they indeed aren't. They're more interested in seeing what an open campus event is like, seeking other pleasures that don't involve lectures. Nonetheless, they promise not to interfere with what's going on between the two, while Kaito pretends there's nothing happening between him and his companion in this literal meeting. Looking to the side, the part-time adventurer spots an ad for the Dan brothers on a TV and ends up staring at it. Haruka then asks if he's disappointed that he can't go to the dungeon. Kaito thinks quickly and responds that there's no better plan this Saturday than being with Haruka at this event. She earnestly asks him to take his mind off the dungeon for just today, which he agrees is a good idea. Soon the group arrives in front of the Alka Institute, and Shinji and Hayato emphasize that this is where high society gathers, like a gateway to another world. Upon entering, Haruka is enchanted by the artificial cherry blossoms and assures that they'll return in July when the cherry blossoms are in full bloom. Kaito also fantasizes about this moment, though much more intensely than the young Katsuragi, imagining the two having a romantic moment among the pink flowers. At that moment, he slaps his face to regain control. After all, even if they attend the university together, they'll still just be classmates. Not understanding any of these strange reactions from the guy, Katsuragi just goes with the flow. They then head to the event reception where Eri is attending. With his face swollen from the slap he gave himself, Kaito tries to introduce his friends, but they insist on stepping forward on their own. Thus, Mizutani Hayato and Ahiyama Shinji say their names, hoping to make a good impression on the beautiful girl working at the campus. Eri also wants to know if the girl next to Kaito is his girlfriend, so he explains that she's just a neighbor and childhood friend. Finally, Eri says it's a pleasure to meet everyone and asks them to explore the campus at will, as she'll show them around later. As As they leave, Eri doesn't understand why she felt relieved to know that Haruka is just Kaido's friend. At the same time, Kaido's friends are impressed that he knows that graceful young woman at the reception, so Kaido lets slip that he met her in the dungeon. At that moment, there was no more escape. Haruka finally understood once and for all that the boy was sneaking into the dungeon. As if that wasn't enough, he ends up revealing that it was Eri who invited him to the campus event, so Haruka realizes that he and his companion are only together because of that girl, which worsens the situation. Pretending not to feel the blow, Haruka reminds them that today isn't a day to talk about dungeons, while Kaido's friends drag him away under the excuse that they need to use the bathroom. The first thing the two do is envy Kaido for forming a team with the pretty girl from the reception, but putting that aside, they assert that their friend needs to be more careful about what he says around Katsuragi, as she's clearly worried about his dungeon explorations. With the message delivered, the group heads to the auditorium and is fascinated by its size. Haruka points to the digital blackboard where students can watch classes via tablets, and the boys react as if it's alien technology. They then look at the large number of student clubs the institution offers, like bands, tennis, and a film club. Kaido was about to comment on a D on the wall, a first aid mechanism just like in the dungeon, but his friends manage to stop him in time. Speaking of movies, the group passes by the room where cultural festival productions are shown. When they take a break to chat, Shinji is excited about the cleanliness and grandeur of the place, as is Hayato, but both know they have no chance of getting into this college with their grades. Similarly, Kaido knows he's slacking off in school, so he needs to work hard if he wants to get into Aoka with Katsuragi. Regardless, Hayato reminds him that the tuition is very expensive, and Kaido almost replies that he can pay with the money from the dungeon, but covers his mouth just in time. In the next scene, the couple manages to spend some time alone, and feeling the breeze, Haruka hopes to be able to take her class breaks in the same way. Kaido seemed happy until Hikari and Miku appeared after Aki informed them he was there with friends. Just as they did with the older girl, the pair of pranksters show up just to introduce themselves as charmers, a gesture the girls reciprocate. They also want to know if the girl next to Kaido is his girlfriend, and he explains the same thing he told Eri, leaving Haruka a bit irritated. Since Hikari is in her first year, Kaido wonders if it's too early for her to think about college, but she doesn't want to miss the chance to see one up close while she can. Haruka comments that the two seem quite close to Kaido, although Miku disagrees. Kaido feels the need to explain the origin of this friendship without revealing that it started in the dungeon. Before he could come up with a convincing lie, Miku herself says they met there, so Kaido immediately notices Haruka's icy expression beside him, so cold that it left the boy's skin pale, and Hikari asks if everything is okay. In the meantime, to close the group for good, Eri arrives, inviting everyone to have lunch in the cafeteria on her. When the food arrives at the table, Shinji and Hayato act like they're on a backstage tour of a famous restaurant, taking pictures of the dishes as if they were relics found. Aki explains that since it's a cafeteria, you can order all this with 2,000 yen and still get change, plus the drink refills are free. Moved by so much generosity, the three boys get increasingly excited about the Aoka Institute as they dig into their meal. Speaking of refills, after everyone finishes eating, Haruka asks Kaido to help her refill everyone's drinks. With the departure of the two, Hayato asks if the girls had exploration classes with Professor Onagawa, although they had none of the three seem to have enjoyed the experience much. The boy mimics the cocky and arrogant way of the instructor, and the girls find it funny because it's exactly like the guy. As he made clear with his brief show, Hayato also had classes with that man alongside Shinji, but they are explorers only on paper because they slept in class and didn't know that items that work in dungeons lose their effectiveness if they are more than 3 miles from the entrance. Personally speaking, Hayato tripped and got hurt while running during physical education and tried to heal himself with one of these potions, but ended up just wasting it. Eri says that's exactly why the university was built within a 3-mile radius of the dungeon entrance. All research as well as the production of items and potions is done in this area. Regarding this, Shinji and Hayato comment that weapons also cannot leave the dungeon, and they almost got arrested for trying to leave with them unnoticed. In the end, everyone at the table agrees that the Aoka Institute is strict in its laws, but that's part of what makes this university so incredible and efficient. At that moment, Kaido and Haruka arrive with the drinks, so everyone prepares to move on to the next activity. Thus, they gather in front of a heated pool, and Kaido sees an opportunity opportunity to swim even in winter alongside Haruka. Speaking of which, he remembers the day she saved him when he almost drowned in the primary school pool, just as she saved him from a stray dog that attacked the boy. Listening to the conversation, Mikyu comments that she always knew Kaito couldn't swim. Hikari feels a tingling in her chest, something she's never felt before, and therefore doesn't know the reason, although she can't take her eyes off Kaito. Next, they visit the institution's 6 tennis courts and soccer field. Descending the stairs, Hikari trips and is saved at the exact moment by Kaito. Because of his dungeon exploration experience, the boy had developed his body enough to make such a move. Seeing that the two have been in the same position for some time, Mikyu asks the boy to put her friend down. Soon after, some guys playing soccer end up kicking the ball in Miku's direction, and once again Kaito steps in to resolve the situation, simply returning the ball into the goal. The guys look at him in awe while he pretends nothing happened. At least Mikyu lowered her guard a bit towards Kaito for having avoided the ball hitting her. At this moment, Eri calls the group to visit the dojo, but upon arriving there, she feels nervous when she realizes she will perform a demonstration of her skills. After taking a deep breath, the warrior executes the moves efficiently and impresses her peers, who watch each well-executed strike attentively until the end when everyone applauds. Seeing Kaito applauding, she realizes she was anxious because that boy was watching, and it seems Haruka noticed a different look from her towards him. In the late afternoon, everyone exchanges contacts and says goodbye. Returning by train, the group that left Aoka comments on how amazing this university is. Hayato asks which girl was Shinji's type the most, and he replies all 3. Agreeing enthusiastically, Hayato suggests they return to exploring since the dungeon has so many pretty girls. Kaito tells the guys to stop talking about this before he loses it, but Hayato goes further and invites his friend to the dungeon as well. When Haruka is okay with this, Kaito calms down a bit, though surprised. At night, accompanying the girl home, he promises to study hard to get into Aoka with her. Happy with this, Haruka asks which of the 3 girls was his type, and the boy plays dumb, pretending he never even noticed any of their faces. Actually, he would like to talk about this someday, but not today. By the way, Katsuragi comments that Kaito addressed the 3 girls by their first names, which suggests they have a certain intimacy besides the friends being treated the same way, of course. This makes the girl sad, although she doesn't admit it at first. When she gets to her door, Haruka goes in without further explanation and says goodnight with a sulky face. When he gets home and gets in the bath, the boy becomes thoughtful about this matter, but soon considers it a typical case of jealousy. Even so, he tries to convince himself that Katsuragi would never feel that way about him. Besides, since he brought it up, he needs to think of an explanation for having left Luce and Shile uninvoked all day. The next day, as usual, there's our unlikely hero risking his life to exterminate the dungeon slimes using insecticide. After gathering a good amount of cores, it doesn't take long for Kaito to hear Luce complaining that she was left behind yesterday so the boy could go out with those humans. The boy explains that he went to visit a school with them, and Luce threatens to accuse him of lying, though she has no idea what a school even is. First, Shile explains that it's a place where humans study, then she shows her sadness at being abandoned by her master, even though she understands that he has a life outside the dungeon. To lighten the mood, Kaito promises to set aside 3 cores for each of them until he notices a strange glow at the back of the cave, revealing a rare slime. Kaito tries to draw the girls' attention to the monster, but they only care about the cores. Not just 3, mind you, but they want 200 at once. Kaito insists on pointing out the approaching creature, so the demon loses her patience and devastates the walking jelly without mercy. Immediately, the 2 turn to the master demanding a reward, so he offers 10 cores to each of them. Finally, both sides come to an understanding, and the little ones calm down with their bellies full. As for the destroyed slime, an item drops after the smoke clears, and Kaito analyzes it to be the Gloves of Reason, an item that grants invisible power at the cost of mana points. Curious to know what this invisible power might be, the boy asks the girls for help in identifying what the heck it is. Despite their efforts, it was hard to tell if the item's abilities were being used, since the very concept of the power is to be invisible. So Kaito gets the idea to use the glove in the direction of the water, hoping to cause a visible impact on it, and that actually happens. Seeing this, he imagines that this ability might even work on humans, but doubts it would be useful against monsters. Luce thinks it's not even worth trying, but Kaito insists and comes up with an idea in his head, considering that if he combines this glove with another another ability something interesting might happen. With this in mind, he strikes with his sword using the glove, and the slash cuts through the air, splitting part of the water below him. Moreover, a small block of ice formed during the attack, leaving Kaito proud of the techniques he's been developing. At that moment, the three girls in his group show up in the dungeon, causing Luce and Shile to immediately scowl for obvious reasons. Eri invites the boy to delve into the more difficult levels of the dungeon, but Kaito informs her that he needs to study and can't venture deeper. Eri insists and now wants to have a study session later because she could teach Kaito many things. So the boy agrees but wants Katsuragi to join them. This makes the two entities even more jealous, realizing that those girls are getting closer to their master. Kaito looks back and sees the scowls on their faces, so he tries to buy their good mood with more cores, which works. The humans see the scene of the little ones eating with indignant faces and can't resist their cuteness. Soon the group sets out for the 9th floor for the first time, knowing they need to be very careful. Speaking of which, the Valkyrie warns them that there's a powerful enemy up ahead. Looking at his map, the man in the group sees there's no way to bypass the enemy, and Luce assures them that she will defeat the monster if necessary. However, Eri, more experienced, reminds them that in the worst case scenario, they can always flee. So they continue on until they encounter a terrifying Orthros, a monster that shouldn't be on this floor. Kaito suggests they turn back and Eri agrees, mobilizing the group to retreat, but the monster spots the humans and attacks. Luceria warns everyone to be careful of the fire breath, while Kaito asks Shile to use the Maiden's Wall. Protected, the group prepares their strategy to face the monster. Eri and Miku draw their magical core firearms, while Hikari conjures Earth Wave in an attempt to immobilize the enemy. When the ground becomes sticky, preventing the Orthros from moving forward, Kaito orders Luce to attack with the Flames of Destruction. However, the damage from the ability is almost negligible. The Orthros retaliates with its fire breath, and although Shile's shield blocks the brunt of the attack, the heat could still be felt inside the barrier. Luceria doesn't give up and now uses her corrosive breath, which manages to trap the Orthros for a brief moment, just enough for Miku to command Snatch's advance. Despite this, none of the attacks prove to be very effective against the monster. To turn the situation around, Kaito decides to use himself as bait and instructs Luce to use the Flames of Destruction on the Orthros' belly when it's distracted. She waits for the giant canine to focus all its attention on the human and positions herself beneath it, obeying her master's commands. The result seems to inflict more damage on the beast, but it's not enough. Kaito deduces that they need more firepower, so he calls on Shile to join the offensive with her Divine Lance Rogenate, while Luce continues attacking with the same ability she used before. Combining the two spells, the group manages to inflict significant damage on the opponent, but Kaito falls victim to the beast's wrath. As it's heavily struck, the Orthros now intends to retaliate with equal force and nearly steps on the boy. Eri and Miku react with their firearms, while Kaito gets the idea to throw a water ball into the Orthros' mouth. This ability doesn't produce any decisive result, but the combined efforts of all the group's members attacking intensely as a team subdue the Orthros to the point where it can barely fight back. After a relentless sequence of attacks, Kaito finishes the battle with his new long-range slashing technique. With their victory, everyone is excited and eager to continue the exploration. However, the girls are exhausted from all the challenges and need some rest before proceeding with the journey. Luce questions what an Orthros was doing there, while the Valkyrie senses the presence of someone even more powerful. Suddenly, from the depths of the cave, a nearly human voice emerges, stating that the monster was merely a dog easily defeated. As the voice spoke, the creature revealed itself from the shadows, and upon seeing those ears, horns, wings, and skin tone, Luceria had no doubts it was a demon. Once again, the group doesn't understand what a creature like this is doing on a level so close to the surface, and considers that perhaps the demon was controlling the Orthros. Before anything else, the demon warns that no one will be allowed to escape, using the Dark Nightmare to ensure that happens. Shile protects her allies with the Maiden's Wall, prompting the demon to admit that it's an effective barrier, but he doubts it can withstand his next attack, a charge so fast that no one could even see it. Faced with this, Kaito fills the Valkyrie with cores so she won't let the magical shield fall, while the rest of the group attacks from within as best they can. However, even after using all their firepower, the rival remains unscathed. Kaito analyzes the demon stats and sees that his name is Belia and his HP has barely been affected. Luce suggests that Shile should join the attack, but Kaito fears what might happen without the Maiden's Wall protecting everyone. Eri assures them that they'll be fine even though the enemy's attacks are fast, so Kaito agrees with the team's wishes and orders Shile to lower the shield and join the assault. Soon the team returns to the offensive now with a Valkyrie added to the mix, but even so the demon remains unharmed. On the contrary, he's so unscathed that his attacks remain as swift as ever. In a surprise move with his sword, the monster nearly finishes off Kaito, but Eri saves him just in time with her Naginata. The demon pushes the woman back with a power, so Kaito reacts with his explosion ability, which destroys the sword the demon received from a duke, causing a significant blow to the creature. Overcome with rage, Belia unleashes a series of punches that Kaito tries to block with an ice shield, but the shield shatters and the human is severely injured. Shile and Luce witness the scene and furious at seeing their master herd attack with even greater ferocity. In the meantime, Kaito takes a potion to get back into the fight, but knows he needs a better strategy. Soon he calls Miku and asks her to do something. Without hesitation, the girl resumes her attack alongside Snatch, allowing Kaito to use the distraction to stab the demon from behind with the magic sword Baltzard, and use his explosion ability, which finally deals considerable damage to the opponent. In response, the demon uses dark healing to regenerate, and returns to the attack with increasing fury. With a single punch, he nearly finishes off Kaito. The other group members do everything they can to stop Belia from reaching the boy, but none of them succeed. In a last-ditch effort, Kaito remembers Luceria's ability Gluttony's Beauty, which boosts her stats by consuming the target's HP. He asks her to risk using him as the target even though it might kill him. With no other choice, the demon obeys and assumes her highest form. The enemy uses the Dark Nightmare again, but this time Luceria feels no damage. Being of the Viscount class, she would never be defeated by a lower-level demon. Realizing this, Belia immediately loses his bravado, while Luceria conjures the god-slaying dust storm and eliminates the target instantly. Afterward, even seeing Kaito on the brink of death, she asks him to swear that he'll treat her as well as he treats Shile. The boy promises, nearly passing out. During the rest, Kaito discovers he gained 8 GP points and a new skill, Pain Resistance, after enduring so much from the Gluttony's Beauty. With that, Luce promises to take it slower next time, causing the boy to despair. Besides him, the 3 human members of the team also leveled up, so everyone celebrates the great victory together. Then, of course, it's time to check the spoils. Kaito eyes the Orthros magic core, the largest he's ever seen, but the best part is that the demon Belia dropped a servant card. Luceria wants the boy to sell the card because she doesn't want the company of such a weak demon, but Kaito ignores her tantrum and summons the item. In seconds, a little horned brat was swearing eternal loyalty to his master. Since his level was nullified, his size and strength are even smaller than before. With that, Kaito asks for a return of the product, and the little demon nearly cries from the rejection. In the dungeon company's shower, Kaito laments his wasted effort, while Belia massages his boss's back, trying to convince him to keep him. When it's time to sell the Orthros magic core, the dungeon employee can hardly believe those young people defeated such a powerful monster, especially since they encountered this beast on the 9th floor, which shouldn't have happened. For this reason, she plans to send a team to investigate. Nevertheless, she's willing to pay 24 million yen for the core, which is almost $200,000. Losing his mind at hearing that amount, Kaito impulsively asks to split the amount into 4, but the girls don't care about the money since they were born with silver spoons in their mouths, so they want the boy to keep it all. He insists on dividing it as the monster was defeated by the group, so the employee provides the documentation for Kaito to declare income tax. Thus, after defeating the dungeon dog, the protagonist now faces the tax man. Once everything is settled, the group gathers to eat a fruit dessert and explain to Kaito how to avoid tax evasion and be a model citizen. By the end of the afternoon, everyone is proud of what they accomplished today, and Eri comments that Kaito has a knack for attracting special things. Considering that he already got 3 servant cards, he thinks about it for a moment but quickly concludes no. The next day in her trophy-filled room, Miku is chatting with Hikari on the computer. Hikari mentions that she's excited about the weekend because she wants to see everyone's new skills. Miku feels the same way but advises her friend to take it easy on the nerves. Despite that, Hikari assures her she's calm and insists it would be a waste to just rest. Finally, she says she'll see Miku over the weekend and logs off, though in reality Hikari is struggling with a severe cough. The following day, Kaito tries to uncover the special abilities of the group's newest member. But before that, Belia asks for a sword as it's her main weapon. Kaito claims he didn't know the demon had such a weapon, but Luceria reminds him that he broke the boy's sword. Taking responsibility, Kaito tries to compensate for the damage by offering the demon a tungsten staff. Belia thanks him, but asks if the master has something a bit more like a sword. However, Kaito informs her that it's the only thing he has at the moment. So the small demon tests her new weapon against the local monsters. After defeating the first one, Belia quickly moves on to the second, ending the fight with no difficulty, showcasing great talent with the weapon. Everyone praises the demon's display of strength except Luceria, who comments on how much slower he's become. Embarrassed, Belia explains that his body changed to reflect his new level, and fearing rejection, the young demon promises to gain the acceptance of Lady Sylphie and Lady Luceria. Hearing the boy refer to the girls as Lady, everyone finds his behavior curious, and the Valkyrie admits she didn't mind it. Later, Kaito's first mission is to discover the demon's abilities, and for that he needs to lose some HP since he plans to start with dark healing. As everything goes according to plan, the demon uses the ability on the master, but nothing happens. After a few seconds, a small amount of HP is restored, and Belia explains that dark healing mainly regenerates wounds and only recovers just enough HP to keep you from dying. Hearing this, the human plans to use this spell to counter the HP drain from Luce's gluttony beauty. Hearing this, she offers to test the strategy right away, but traumatized Kaito tries to avoid the small demon by walking backward, only to trip over a rock and hurt himself. Taking advantage of the injury, Belia asks to test dark healing once more, which the master agrees to. As soon as Kaito receives dark healing again, he feels his wounds healing and thinks they can save a lot on potions this way. After that, they encounter a new enemy in the dungeon to test their skills, with Eri and Hikari taking the first move. The youngest debuts her ice circle, a trap that freezes the monster, and Eri tests a new ability called Zantasugeki, which envelops her Naginata with a purple magic. When the warrior strikes the opponent, the block of ice is cut in half. Kaito is amazed by the quality of his friend's abilities, a sentiment shared by Eri, though she notes that the one she used consumes too much MP, so she needs to be careful when using it since it's a one-hit kill. The group then ventures into another test against some giant golems. Miku leads with Snatch and invokes the Dance of Visions, bringing imaginary pink petals to the battlefield that distract the monsters. She then orders Snatch to use Hedgehog power, and the creature obeys, firing numerous spikes from its back, ending the fight. Once again, Kaito is impressed by the level his teammates have reached, while Miku hugs her pet to celebrate another victory together. Now it's Shile's turn to showcase the ability she gained from leveling up Valkyrie's song, and Kaito asks Luce and Belina to join the fight when the goblins appear. As Shile begins to sing a song about the awakening of heroes' voices that quietly hide in the depths, Kaito feels power flowing within him. He can now see the enemy's movements so clearly that it's possible to anticipate their attacks, and he uses this to defeat the goblins alongside the other members of the party, who also do their job with no difficulty. After the victory, Luce comments that she felt very powerful, even though it wasn't at the level she reaches with gluttony beauty. On the other hand, Belia says she didn't feel any difference in her body with the song's enhancement, though she could hear Shile's beautiful voice singing the magic song. Luce deduces that the effect depends on the bond of trust the person has with the spell's caster, which the demon laments not having with any group members so far. To console the youngest team member, Eri pats his head and assures him that he'll build relationships with everyone. Even Luceria gives the boy a supportive shoulder pat, and he, with tears in his eyes, shares that he used to be a rear guard but eventually became a knight. Because of this, he significantly improved his blade skills, and it's for this reason he believes he could perform even better with a sword. Moved by another heartfelt request from the young demon, demon Kaito asks for a moment and rushes off to buy a bastard sword for Belia. Despite this, Belina doesn't react, making everyone think he didn't like the gift even though it was so expensive. To make matters worse, the small demon starts to cry, leading everyone to believe he hated the weapon so much that he reacted this way. But the truth is the exact opposite. The emotion of receiving this gift overwhelmed him to the point of tears. Thus, he accepts the blade in hand and promises to make good use of it while it lasts. Moreover, he plans to demonstrate his rare talent with this type of weapon to his master. Soon, facing 3 enemies 3 times his size, Belina shows he has enough skill to be an important member of the group as he fights the opponents with grace and efficiency, defeating them with ease, impressing everyone watching the scene. Then Kaito comments that Belia must have trained a lot to reach this level, which once again brings the tearful demon to tears, touched by the praise from his master. The human asks to be trained with the sword, which Belia suggests they do right away, but Kaito explains that he needs to get home early today because tomorrow he's going to study at Eri's house with the other girls. As expected, Shile and Luceria are jealous of this unexpected news, while Kaito promises Belia that he'll be back on Sunday. Without delay, another day passes, and soon Kaito, Haruka, Shinji, and Hayato find themselves in front of the enormous gate of Eri's house, though they wonder if it's really a residence and not the gate of a fortress from the Edo period. Just then, a limousine arrives and Miku and Hikari step out. After greeting their friends, they press a button on the door to open it, and the rest of the group is left speechless as they see a huge forest inside. The girls waste no time and get into the car that will take them to the house, while the boys attempt to do the same. However, Hikari and Miku warn them that the path known as the men's slope is a bit different for male visitors who will have to walk the long route on foot. A few minutes later, the women arrive and greet the hostess. Haruka Katsuragi thanks her for the warm welcome and compliments the beauty of Eri's house, to which Eri explains that her family has had a martial arts dojo for many years, and the grounds are equipped with everything needed to achieve a balance between mind, skills, and body. For example, she points out the waterfall that serves to calm the mind, the dojo for honing skills, and a garden designed to strengthen the body. Even the men's slope was developed to build the endurance of those who traverse it, which is why Eri herself uses this path every day. Speaking of the men's slope, the boys arrive exhausted after what feels like a marathon. They try to complain that they're in no condition to study, but the girls ignore their complaints and head into the dojo. Shinji confesses he's confused about studying in a dojo because he assumed it would take place in the hostess's room, but Eri believes the room isn't large enough to accommodate so many people, even though Shinji is convinced it is. Moreover, the warrior might practice spear movements with them if they lose focus during their studies. Kaito and Hayato attempt to explain that only Eri can pull off the acrobatics with the Naginata, but they decide to drop the matter. Soon everyone takes their seats and Kaito ends up sitting next to Eri, which saddens Katsuragi. Kaito starts by saying he's having trouble with math, and Haruka feels even more uncomfortable seeing Eri help the boy she likes. Hikari, who made sure to sit next to her new friend, asks for her help with a problem, while Shinji slyly offers to assist the younger girl with anything she needs. Hayato interrupts his friend, warning that he's the knowledgeable one around here, not Shinji. Kaito feels compelled to step in and tell them to calm down, reminding them that they're equally clueless. Hikari thanks them for the offer, but prefers to study with Katsuragi. Kaito assures her that Hikari is in good hands because Haruka is attentive and kind. However, suddenly Kaito's voice comes from somewhere else, adding that besides all that she's also hot. At that point, the atmosphere becomes tense, prompting Eri to suggest they all go to the waterfall to cool down. Standing before the water, the boys shiver from the cold and ponder whether they should even go in, while the girls meditate under the waterfall, showing that they're a bit more dedicated to the exercise. Upon leaving the water, Haruka leaves Kaito more infatuated, making it difficult for him to pretend he wasn't looking at her. Regardless, it's now the boys' turn to demonstrate their mental focus with their heads under the waterfall, but it seems they can't concentrate on anything other than the cold. As night falls and it's time to leave, the girls seem closer than ever, unlike the boys who only feel that the cold water made them forget everything they studied. In the dungeon the next day, Luce and the other servants are outraged by the girls' happiness and lightheartedness, not to mention their jealousy over the fun stories from the previous night. As a result, the three promise to show everything they know to gain Eri's attention and the others. Miku asks Hikari to take it easy today, but the girl assures her she's feeling calm and happy, plus she needs to become a heroine. With that, Miku's eyes well up, and she holds her friend's hand. Shiel warns of the arrival of monsters, so her master asks her to sing the Valkyrie's song. With its enhancement, Hikari freezes the opponents, giving the rest of the group a chance to launch their attack after Kaito assigns each person a role in the conflict. Once again, everyone performs well in the battle, surprising Kaito, who can't believe they're defeating monsters on the 9th floor so easily. On the other hand, Luceria is not happy at all because she was left out of the fun since the master didn't assign her any tasks in the fight. As always, Kaito soothes the beast with food by giving some magical cores to her and the other two servants. During this pause, Hikari sees the smiles on everyone's faces and wishes these happy days would last forever. A little later, they finally reach the 10th floor, and Hikari seems determined to descend even with the others' doubts. However, she suddenly feels a sharp pain and collapses to the ground. Desperate, Miku cries as she cradles her friend in her arms and sees that Hikari is bleeding from the mouth. 2 years ago, a man called out to Miku in a store, but she corrected him, reminding him that her player name was Queen. The man backtracked and asked Queen if they could have a battle. The girl accepted the challenge, and soon the people around the store overheard her response, amazed that the store's champion had agreed to the duel. Aizawa, being the former champion, tried to reclaim his title from the young girl, but once again he failed. He wasn't ready to give up and wanted a second round until Queen asked him if he wasn't just wasting time. The guy got furious and reminded the girl that players like her who pay to fill their decks with rare cards aren't game prodigies, they're just rich kids. Queen defended herself by arguing that even if she had the best cards, she still needed to know them inside out and play with a strategy that matched their characteristics. This brilliant and irrefutable argument made the overweight Ash run off crying to his mom. After yet another crushing victory, Miku found herself reflecting on her life and concluded that she was always bored, convinced that nothing could ever entertain her again. That was until a young girl decided to stand up to her in the card game. Fast forward to the present, this little girl who initiated the challenge back then was now lying in a hospital bed being visited by Miku and the other members of her group. Eri suggested it was time to leave, but Miku insisted on staying a bit longer. Kaito remarked that a high-quality potion should soon get the little one back on her feet, but their friend was determined to stay and made it clear that she wouldn't leave. After all, potions can only heal wounds like cuts, burns, and broken bones, but what Hikari had was different. Surprised, Eri asked if her friend knew something about the girl's illness just as the sick girl's parents rushed into the room. The father expressed his gratitude for them staying by his daughter's side all this time and mentioned that his daughter had talked a lot about Eri and Kaito too, about how going to the park with the two of them was even more fun for her. This phrase triggered some memories in Miku's mind, instantly causing her to lose her composure and run out of the room. Kaito and Eri chased after their friend, who was now outside the hospital watching the families in the courtyard, enjoying the arrival of Christmas just as Hikari should have been doing. On that day when she was challenged by the younger girl, Hikari had smiled when her challenge was accepted. During the game, Miku noticed that her rival's deck was identical to hers. Comparing her strategy to her opponent's, Miku analyzed that she was more aggressive, whereas Hikari was more defensive and cautious. After some time in a balanced match, the Grand Queen finally took the game and won the match. With her morale intact, she asked why the challenger didn't build a deck that suited her better. The little one explained that she adored Queen, which is why she wanted to play with a deck identical to hers. Surprised, Miku pointed out that this style of deck didn't match the way she played at all, so she offered to build one that was perfect for her. Hikari jumped for joy at the prospect of the store's own champion offering to do that, while Miku asked to be called by her first name. Without delay, the two began building a new deck, and this activity sparked a friendship that would permanently dispel the monotony of Miku's life. As time passed, the pair became inseparable, and Miku believed she would be by her partner's side forever. When a national tournament of duel fighters, the game they loved, was announced, the two decided to enter together and began studying their opponents and their characteristics. On the day of the big event, the duo played together against their adversaries, advancing advancing through all the stages until they were crowned the grand champion. Mikyu lifted the trophy and handed it to her partner to do the same, but Hikari, suffering from her illness, collapsed in the middle of the ceremony. Quickly, the young girl was rushed to the hospital, and while being carried by the nurses to one of the rooms, she tried to tell her friend about the illness she was suffering from but fell asleep before she could express herself. The only thing she managed to say was that she would soon experience something. At that moment, the sick girl was taken to the IQ where Mikyu couldn't enter, so she stayed behind questioning what her friend had meant. The girl's parents arrived in a panic and Hikari's father revealed her illness. Back in the present moment, Kaito asked if that was when she found out what the girl had, and he also wanted to know what it was. Faced with the girl's silence, Eri touched Kaito's shoulder and asked him to respect her space because Mikyu shouldn't be forced to speak. However, the sick girl's father approached and volunteered to reveal the truth. Hikari's condition caused total organ failure over time, something that had no cure and was very difficult to treat even with modern medicine. The doctors told the man that his daughter might not survive until the new year if she had another collapse. As much as he wanted to hide it from her, Hikari was very perceptive and ended up noticing her condition, so he felt compelled to tell her when she asked at a certain point. Eri commented that it didn't seem like the young girl had such a severe illness because she was always full of energy, so Mikyu explained that the medications suppressed the symptoms in addition to the fact that adventurers' stats increase in dungeons, which kept her resistance high. Hearing talk of dungeons, Hikari's father discovered the reason her illness had worsened. She had been lying to her parents, saying she was going to the park with her friends every weekend. Realizing she had unintentionally given her friend away, Mikyu apologized, but after a brief reflection, the girl's father decided there was no need to apologize because he was sure that's what his daughter wanted. Kaito didn't understand why Hikari would take such risks in the dungeon despite knowing her condition, so Mikyu told the truth. One day, Mikyu read an article about a miraculous remedy that could cure any disease said to be found in the dungeon. This medication was extremely rare and could be auctioned on the black market for hundreds of millions of yen. The item is called the elixir. Suddenly, Hikari, having escaped from the hospital, noticed her friend reading about the elixir and assumed that Mikyu was planning to venture into the dungeon to find it. Before Hikari could volunteer to join, Mikyu warned her that the dungeon was an extremely dangerous place and that she couldn't take her there. However, Hikari argued that if it was as dangerous as people said, that was all the more reason not to go alone. This is why she wanted to go with Mikyu, even though her friend was determined not to let her. To cool Hikari's head, the older girl suggested they take a walk and bought juice for both of them. Hikari mentioned that finding an elixir could advance research that might help others suffering from the same condition as hers, acknowledging that she couldn't place that kind of pressure on her partner. Mikyu saw this as a noble attitude, recognizing the way Hikari viewed things, and decided to reconsider offering to accompany her to the dungeon. The two hugged and Hikari got excited at the prospect of being a hero for people suffering from some illness. After this, Hikari's father thanked Mikyu for being such a good friend to his daughter and for exploring the dungeon alongside her. Hearing this, Mikyu was filled with joy and said she was only doing what she could at the moment. Curiously, upon hearing this, Kaito felt like he had heard that phrase somewhere before. Anyway, since Hikari wanted to be a hero for the sick, Mikyu wished to be her personal hero. She then apologized to Eri for not telling her earlier, but the older girl replied that she would have done the same and offered to join the search for the elixir. Mikyu commented regretfully that it was uncertain whether this item even existed, but Eri assured her that she believed in it just as much as her comrades did. Likewise, Kaito rejoined the group, and the members decided to descend to the 10th floor tomorrow in search of the elixir. The next day, upon arriving there, the team encountered camels charging toward them, prompting Kaito to ask Shile to use the Valkyrie song. After receiving the enhancement, Mikyu used the Dance of Visions and launched Snatch to take down one of the camels. With her Naginata, Eri conjured the Zantatsujeki ability and defeated another monster. Belia then used Brute Strength to bring down the last animal, driving her sword into its body. After their victory, the group concluded that they would have to defeat many monsters before finding the antidote, and Luce began to recall moments with Hikari. Despite her rough demeanor, she felt motivated to pursue the elixir. Changing the subject, Kaito knew this was a desert region, but couldn't couldn't help remarking on how unbearably hot it was even though there was no sun. Drinking her water, Eri agreed that the dungeon was indeed a strange place. The boy asked if the servants were feeling the heat, but it seemed the temperature wasn't much of an issue for them, especially for Luceria, who had already endured far worse in the demon realm. Berulia, feeling jealous for not being asked as well, demanded attention from her master, but soon noticed something in a corner of the cave, prompting him to order everyone to stay alert. Similarly, Shiles sensed something strange and tried to warn Kaito that something was moving beneath him, but there wasn't enough time for him to react. A creature suddenly emerged from the sand, wrapping its body around the human. Belina screamed that it was a sandworm, so Luceria prepared to make her mark once again by launching the flames of destruction, but Shile reminded her that their master was in the middle of it all and would be roasted if she did that. Therefore, Mikyu took responsibility and conjured the Dance of Visions, causing the worm to release Kaito. Luce seized the moment to unleash her power, but Belina anticipated this and defeated the monster with her sword before the pupil could act. Because of this, she scolded the shorty, so Kaito resolved the situation by promising to leave the next monster for the demon, while thanking the young demon for the help. Later, back at the dungeon hospital, the team recounted their day's adventure to Hikari, who admitted she would have loved to see Kaito being attacked by a sandworm. After this reunion, Mikyu burst into tears upon seeing her friend smile like that despite her condition. When her car arrived to take her and Eri back, the older girl commented to Kaito that she wanted to become a hero strong enough to protect those she loved, and she was doing everything she could now. With that, Kaito once again recalled that he had heard that phrase somewhere before. Puzzled by this, he received a call from Haruka Katsuragi. The girl had heard that Hikari was hospitalized and wanted to know how she was doing. Kaito didn't want to worry his friend, so he considered lying to her, and the fact that he wanted to lie reminded him of where he had heard Eri's phrase. A long time ago, when he was still a kid, Kaito saw Haruka calling her father a liar because he had said he wouldn't go to the dungeon. The man explained that someone had to go in there to discover its secrets and true nature, and that he wanted to be that person, so he was doing what he could now. With this memory in mind, the boy asked to call her back later and hung up the phone to return to the dungeon. Back on the 10th floor, he too decided to do what was possible, just as Captain Katsuragi and the others had done, so that one day he could become a hero. However, his routine didn't seem as heroic as he imagined. Arriving home exhausted and downcast after yet another busy day, Kaito was spotted by Haruka from her bedroom window. As soon as he got home, the first thing he did was take a bath to relax. Outside the bathroom, his mom scolded him for always coming home late unless he was busy with work. Either way, she didn't want her son to overdo it because he also needed to study. So while he nearly passed out from fatigue in the bath, he promised not to push himself too hard. The next day in class, Haruka glanced over at her friend's desk, but he wasn't there. Suddenly, Kaito rushed in the middle of the lesson, apologizing to the teacher for oversleeping. She pointed out that the boy had been running late far too often lately, so Kaito vowed to turn things around. Later, between classes, a few girls were excited about the recently released Dungeon Love spin-off, while Shinji and Hayato lamented that Haruka wouldn't be able to visit Hikarin. Kaito, as usual, was passed out in the classroom. After school, the boy was utterly drained, but insisted to his friends that he was fine. On the way home, they thought Kaito was going to visit Hikarin, but he took advantage of being close to the dungeon to make a detour and search for the elixir. As he left, Shinji questioned Hayato if they should help their friend in his quest, but Hayato reminded him that they were weaker than NPCs at their current level, so they'd only be in the way. So they headed straight to Dungeon Hospital and spent the afternoon playing cards with Hikarin. She was thrashing them because she was so good at cards, prompting Hayato to challenge her to Legend of Dungiata. Shinji warned his friend to give up because he didn't stand a chance against her in anything, which made Hikarin laugh. She mentioned she learned from Miku. In the end, Hayato declared he'd bring a video game next time because he was unbeatable in Dungeolatoon 3. Regarding that game, Hikarin mentioned her rank was S+50, and the boy realized he was in for another beating. Unfortunately, Hikarin coughed in the middle of the conversation, but assured them she was fine. The boys said their goodbyes, promising to return soon, and Hikarin asked them to thank Haruka Katsuragi for the food basket she'd left as a gift. Despite always sending messages, Haruka still hadn't visited her friend in the hospital, and Hikarin confessed that it made her sad. To lighten the mood, Hayato explained that Haruka wasn't a fan of the dungeon park where the hospital was located, while Shinji added that the girl was shy to the bone and hated crowds. At this point, point, Hikarin asked if Haruka had any connection to Captain Katsuragi, and Hayato accidentally let slip that she did. With plenty of time on her hands, Hikarin had been reading a lot and came across a book called The History of Dungeons, where she found a mention of Captain Katsuragi, who had the same surname as Haruka and a similar eye color. Since the girl was aware of the situation, Hayato admitted that the captain was Haruka's father, which Hikarin had already suspected. She read that he was hailed as a hero for being the first captain of the Special Dungeon Exploration Squad. One day, he disappeared after reporting that he'd reached the 41st floor. With this in mind, Hikarin understood why Haruka didn't want to go near the park. Shinji figured that Haruka was worried about Hikarin's dungeon explorations, and Hikarin wondered if it was her fault that her friend was upset with her, but the boys were quick to dismiss that idea. Still, Hikarin considered the possibility that Haruka's father might be alive since he had only disappeared. So she vowed to reach the 41st floor when she got better, or go even deeper if necessary, because that was the only way Haruka might feel comfortable visiting the park again. Meanwhile, Kaito and the girls were making progress in the dungeon, descending further and facing increasingly powerful creatures like the Sphinx. As always, Shill sang the Valkyrie song to boost the group, and Belia sliced through the monster's fire blast with her sword. Then Kaito called on Luce to start the counterattack, and the demon unleashed her flames of destruction. Though it dealt damage, it wasn't enough to take down the feline, which retaliated by charging at Shile. The Valkyrie cast Dance of Visions, teleporting Eri and Mikyu to the monster's rear. Eri used Zantetsuji to strike the opponent, while Mikyu and Snatch attacked from a distance. Kaito seized the opportunity, dashing under the Sphinx's belly and using his Baltzard magic sword to unleash the disintegrate ability, finishing the battle by defeating the creature. With this important victory, all the team members leveled up, considering the Sphinx wasn't an ordinary opponent. Shile and Belia applauded the humans for leveling up, but Luce was fuming because only the humans kept leveling up, while the servants were left stuck in the same place. Unbothered, the Valkyrie informed her master about the item dropped by the Sphinx, but Kaito dismissed it as just another magic core. According to Eri and Mikyu, finding the elixir was going to be difficult, which is why Kaito urged the group to continue the expedition. They were determined to reach the portal by the end of the day. Of course, not before giving the small ones some magic cores to eat, since by now they were already complaining about being hungry. Without delay, the boy handed out some food to his partners Luce and Shile, and soon Belia and Mikyu showed up with hungry looks on their faces, leaving Kaito confused about whether they wanted to eat too. Later, the group returned to the dungeon staff, who informed them that today's captured items were worth 4,590,000 yen. The staff member was about to announce how much each of the three group members would get, but Kaito quickly reminded her that there were 4 members. Hikarin was still part of the team and deserved her share too. As they left the dungeon that night, Kaito asked if Eri and Mikyu could really stay in the dungeon on weekdays, since they had mentioned they could only do so on weekends. Eri explained that it wasn't an issue as long as she didn't have any university seminars or workshops. Honestly, she wished she could come every day. As for Mikyu, she could also explore the dungeon whenever she had free time. With that, Mikyu asked Kaito how he was doing, since he'd been looking a little pale lately, but he assured them he was fine and dashed off to the station after saying goodbye to his friends. Once home, Kaito watched the series Dungeon Love, where the protagonist pointed out that it wouldn't be any fun if rare items were easy to find. His sister chimed in, saying that monsters on the deeper floors have a higher chance of dropping rare items. So the two concluded that they had to delve even deeper into the dungeon and uncover its mysteries if they wanted to become great explorers. Hearing their conversation, Kaito realized he would have a better chance of finding the elixir if he ventured deeper into the dungeon, prompting him to look up information about the monsters on the 12th floor. When morning came, Kaito had to return to school, and it was no surprise that he was completely wiped out. His teacher, Furious, did everything in her power to wake him up during class. After school, Kaito ran straight toward the dungeon, but his friends intercepted him along the way, urging him to take a break because he was pushing himself too hard. They invited him to do something relaxing like going bowling, but Kaito wasn't interested in resting and geared up to leave. Haruka tried to stop him one last time, pointing out that everyone knew he was doing this for Hikarin, but she couldn't quite articulate her thoughts, and Kaito slipped away, running again toward his goal. Once in the dungeon, Kaito decided to descend to the 12th floor, even without Eri and Mikyu, but he lost his balance balance and fell. Shile remarked that her master seemed exhausted, though he denied it. Luce agreed, saying the Valkyrie was right since the fatigue was written all over the human's face. Finally, Belia, ever polite and formal, apologized if he was overstepping, but suggested Kaito take the day off. Even so, Kaito chose to press on, but promised to retreat if things got dangerous. And so they descended to the floor, which was an icy expanse. Due to the intense cold, the team leader figured they'd need additional gear to withstand the temperature, but decided to explore a bit before heading back. After some time walking, they didn't encounter any monsters, and even Shile couldn't detect any threats, so Kaito decided it was time to return. However, just after making that decision, the Valkyrie sensed a strange presence rapidly expanding like an explosion. Suddenly, a swarm of bats flew past them, as if fleeing from a dark tunnel ahead, followed by increasingly louder and heavier footsteps until the entire floor began to shake. Then a herd of giant wild boars came charging toward them, and the team realized it was a stampede. Shile activated her magic shield and Kaito scooped her up so they could flee while protected, but they quickly realized they wouldn't be able to escape in time. With no other options, he asked Sylphie to sing the Valkyrie's song. Grumbling that her master had pushed his limits despite all the warnings, Luceria unleashed her flames of destruction, taking down some of the boars, but there were too many, and the rest of the herd continued barreling forward at full speed. With no alternative, the team dove into battle with the wild beasts, taking down a large portion of them. To their surprise, the girls' levels increased mid-fight, but the battle wasn't over yet, as another boar approached Kaito, prepared to strike, but slipped on the ice and was hit hard by the creature. As if that weren't enough, more boars closed in on him, and he couldn't avoid being gravely injured by the stampede. With Kaito's HP rapidly dropping, Belia desperately tried to save his master. When he reached Kaito, the girls urged him to grab the boy and run. Since they had leveled up, they had learned a new skill and were now absorbing the magical cores scattered on the ground for energy. Once they had done so, the Valkyrie and the demon combined their magic to cast a spell together. While Shile attacked with the goddess's judgment, Luceria unleashed the wrath of purgatory. Far off, Belia managed to shield Kaito from the massive explosion caused by the power surge, but even then he noticed his master didn't seem to be in good shape and might not even be alive. Without wasting time, the young demon applied dark healing to the human as Shile and Luceria returned after their victory. However, Belia was running out of mana, so Luce slapped Kaito's face to stop him from slipping away. Sylphie tried to give him an HP potion, but the liquid spilled from his mouth, so she decided to transfer it to him mouth to mouth to ensure it was swallowed. Seeing that Kaito was improving, whether from the potion or something else, Luceria eagerly opened another vial and repeated the process, and Shile quickly followed suit. Innocently, Belia prepared his own potion to join in, but the girls made it clear he was not invited. After all that effort, Kaito managed to stand up only to pass out again from exhaustion. He was immediately taken to the dungeon's healer, but his injuries weren't too serious, and the only recommendation was rest. Eri and Miku visited him at the medical center, and he admitted he was terrified during the stampede. After Kaito was discharged, Eri offered to give him a ride home, but he declined and dashed off to the station. Slipping away from the girls, he apologized internally to Hikarin.